Any other questions, comments about the syllabus? Point spread, anything like that?
Just one that last page.
So we go from 10:50 to 12:05, is that right? Let's try and when we're about halfway through, let's take a little, because that's a long time to sit. So make sure that we take kind of a 5-minute break in order to. It's hard to sit for that long. Most people say after 10 minutes, your attention starts, like people can focus for about 10 minutes. And after that, you start thinking about what you're going to have for lunch or seeing your friends or something along those lines. Okay. Generally, what I like to do, I like to start off class with a little outline, just so you kind of know where I'm going to be going in a particular class. You can sort of follow along as we're going. So let's start with that. I'll actually fill in a fair amount of that as we go along. But first thing we need to do is talk about what we mean when we talk about the environment. So environmental science is obviously has something to do with the science of the environment. So so let's talk about the environment first. What do you guys think of when you think of the environment?
I think of recycling.
You think of recycling? Okay. What else? Land? Land? Weather? What isn't the environment?
The place around us,
Plants around us?
or the stuff around
That isn't the environment?
us?
I'd say everything's in.
Yeah.
See, everything's the environment. So generally, usually the kind of model that people think about is kind of like this, that there's you, and that could be you individually or collectively people, and that there's some kind of something around them. Okay, so recycling, that would be the things around us like our solid waste. Land is obviously around us, weather is around us. You can add into that plants and animals and the air and basically everything outside of yourself you can think of as the environment. And then people who study environmental science are interested, so we can think of this as the environment, and this is people. And then essentially environmental science, and we'll talk about science in a second, but it's essentially the study of how that environment is influencing us, and likewise how we are influencing the environment. So recycling, for example, if we recycle, or if we basically send everything to the landfill, is going to have a different effect on the environment. Any problem with this model that you can think of that sort of seems kind of cut and dry, black and white? I'm here, the environment's there. Is that everybody okay with that?
Well, we're kind of part of the environment, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what the problem with this is. The way I've drawn it is really actually a little bit misleading. First of all, I drew this line out here, which kind of means that whatever's over here is not part of the environment. How far out do we go? How far out do we go? Well, nobody really knows. I mean, we're really part of the universe, okay? So I wouldn't make that a solid line. I would sort of make that a dotted line, okay? Because we really don't know how far that is. And then what about, I mean, this is sort of a dichotomy here too. I mean, you can represent you as a box and the environment like that, so I could have just as easily drawn that like that. How distinct are you yourself? Everybody feel pretty distinct this morning? I'm feeling distinct. Woke up this morning, looked in the, yep, still Dr. B. So there's some consistency there. But in reality, that's a dotted line too. Anybody know how long the cells that line your intestines live before they're replaced? You don't have that? Who's got their smartphones? About 5 days. So the cells that line the lining of your gut will basically be replaced every 5 days. Your liver cells will be replaced about once every year. Certain muscle cells, 15 years. There are some cells in your brain that are still there since when you were a baby. So you've had those. But the rest of your body has completely turned over. You're not yourself anymore. You have brand new atoms that weren't there even yesterday or a few years ago. So even though you feel like there's a constancy behind you, you're constantly turning over. You eat a Big Mac, and the protein from that Big Mac is going to get incorporated into your hair. So what was a burger yesterday, which you would have put out in the environment, because that's everything outside of you, right? You eat it, and now it actually becomes you. So we are the environment, which is, sort of breaks that model down a little bit. So the reason that people get concerned, and you'll hear a lot of concern in this class, the reason people get concerned is that what's out there in the environment eventually is going to become, it's either going to become me, or I'm going to be influenced by it. So you heard, the big Fukushima incident in Japan. People are concerned about that because the radioactivity from those explosions, they've already reached California. So how is that now impacting us? When Chernobyl blew up, most of Europe was covered with radioactive cesium. That got into the grass. Cows ate the grass. I buy, when I can, butter that comes from grass-fed cows. Anybody ever get that? It's called Kelly brand. I'm not promoting that particular brand, but I learned a new way to make coffee. Any coffee drinkers in here? This is going to sound weird, but try it at home if you really like coffee. Do you put milk in your coffee or some sweetener? Okay, if you do, this applies to you. If it doesn't, you can just. But what I do is I drip my coffee, and then I put in a tablespoon of coconut oil, which is kind of fatty. I usually put in a little honey, but you don't have to put honey. And then I take 2 tablespoons of Kelly brand butter. You think, ew, butter in coffee. But what is butter?
Milk.
It's milk. Okay, so it's actually milk that's been if you whip heavy cream first, you get whipped cream. If you keep whipping it, you get butter. So it's basically I'm putting in my milk, and then I put it in a little bullet blender, hit that, and blend it, and I get a head of foam on the top. It's the most delicious thing you've ever had. If you want to try it, you won't change the way. And that way, with the fat, I can not have breakfast because the calories from the fat. But I noticed if I get just regular butter from the store, like Land O'Lakes, and I put in the same amount, the nature of that foam that I got on the top is much smaller and it tastes different. So the fact that the cows are eating grass has some influence on my body, because I'm going to become, the phospholipids that line my cells are derived from fats. Okay, so if those fats come from grass-fed cows versus from basically industrially raised cows, they get grain and all kinds of stuff that cows don't normally eat. So that's a long story just to say that you really become your environment. So, one of the bases for this course is to recognize what is out there and how it's influencing you. How about the atoms of our body? Atoms. This up here. You guys know? Who's seen this before? Periodic table. This basically tells you how matter is classified into different kinds of elements. Okay, and your body, your physical body, I'm not talking about your spiritual nature or anything like that. That's a topic for another class. But basically, you are composed of all these things. Who knows what the universe is made up of mostly?
Nitrogen? Nitrogen?
No. Like the whole universe. That means like solar systems, the sun. How about the sun? Anybody know what the sun is made up mostly?
Carbon.
Hydrogen.
Hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. And then inside the sun, hydrogen is being converted into helium. Okay, that process is called fusion. People have been trying to figure out how to do that on Earth safely. Who's seen Spider-Man 2?
Yep.
Spider-Man 2? Big Spider-Man, that big sun thing, that was controlled fusion. So the universe started with just hydrogen and helium. And that, when you get enough hydrogen together, the gravity starts folding in on itself and you get fusion, and that's a sun. Okay, so any place you see a sun, that's going on. There were no other elements early on in the universe. It was all just basically suns. Eventually a sun uses up its hydrogen, and when it does, it explodes. It gets so hot that it explodes, and in the heat of that explosion, you get the formation of other elements like carbon and nitrogen, and even some of these larger elements over here. So we are intimately connected. You think, okay, well, we just live on the Earth, okay? But that's just recently. All of your atoms come from exploding suns. So you're intimately connected with outer space. You think, oh gosh, that's out there, and then we're down here. Well, that's really, not true. We're connected to the universe. Nobody really knows how big the universe is. It's really, really big, and it's really, really old. But we're kind of connected to that. So that's kind of funny to think. People say, I'm made of stardust. That sounds really corny, but it's actually true. You are embodied. Your elements come from exploding suns. That's kind of cool. Okay, let's talk about some other aspects of environmental science. So we've already talked about that. We've talked about that, and I will post it. I wasn't ready to post my PowerPoints. I'll put more PowerPoints up next time. So if the environment is somehow unhealthy, if you're eating sick cows, okay, maybe that's going to affect you, and I'd rather eat a healthy cow than a sick cow. Or if my broccoli has radioactivity in it, I don't want to eat radioactive broccoli. I want to eat good, healthy broccoli, because that's going to become part of me. So that's why people get concerned about what we're doing to the environment for that very reason. Okay. So we can define environmental science as the study of basically how the natural world works. So we talked about the environment. and in particular, how the world works, and in particular, how this influences people. And how people influence the environment using scientific methods. And that last part's important. It sort of defines the sorts of approaches that we're going to be talking about in this class. You can be a poet and be very much interested in the pond outside your door or about the forest, and you could write about that and be interested in how I'm affecting the forest and how the forest is affecting me, and be very literary and artistic about it. That's not environmental science. It's certainly an intimate connection with the environment, and it's very valid, but we wouldn't typically call that environmental science because you're not using the assumptions and the principles of science. So, so we want to make a distinction between environmental science and other things that often come up when we talk about the environment. One other activity that people get involved with is environmentalism. What do you guys think of when you think of environmentalism? So have you heard the term before? Environmentalist. Somebody is an environmentalist.
Someone who cares more about the environment or spends a lot of time focusing on positive, negatives, and interactions with it.
Exactly. Somebody who is concerned about the environment, who raises issues related to the environment. They're not necessarily scientists. You can think of environmentalism as really a way of thinking that raises the value put on nature and natural systems. A way of thinking that raises the value. I'll just say a way of thinking and acting that raises the value nature and natural systems. It's not scientific per se. And the critical word there in that definition of environmentalism is value. Typically science is not really, values aren't critical for science. Values kind of good and bad, what's good, what's bad. That generally involves a different aspect of human activity. How are we doing on time? Let's just take a little quick 5-minute break. Just stand up, stretch. Not even 5 minutes. Just get your blood going. Just don't want to sit too long. Okay, so if the distinction between environmental science and environmentalism has to do with values and the presence or absence of science, I'd like to spend the rest of the time talking about science. And we'll probably have to finish up this topic for sure on Thursday before we move on to the next chapter. Any questions so far? Environmental science tends to be, well, let me ask you, if you were going to study, let's see, we've already talked about cows and how we raise cows and what, what that does for human health. Tell me what some sort of classical disciplines would be involved if you wanted to study that. What sorts of things? You guys come from a diverse areas of study, so you actually have a fair amount of insight into that. Let's say that was a topic that you were interested in. Grass-fed cows versus industrially raised cows. What other sorts of areas of study would be involved with that?
Talking about like free ranging?
Yeah. Just throw out some topics, some disciplines. You know what I mean by discipline? Like biology, like agriculture, yeah. So there you go. Is biology important for that? Yeah, because maybe you'd be studying the nutrition of cows. So you have cows that eat grass versus cows that basically are kept inside and are fed grains and wheat and barley and those sorts of things and given antibiotics and all that. So yeah, that would be biology. What else is involved with that topic? Is that it? Just biology? Is that biology?
I guess you could do animal behavior.
Animal behavior. Okay, so how do animals behave based upon, do they want to eat the grains you're giving them, or are they, just would rather eat grass?
You can also go to the physical index of the animal itself, muscle mass, fat mass, the protein that comes from it is the actual more beneficial for
Okay.
you based on the
Good. That's still biology. Think bigger.
You said the psychology of it?
Psychology.
You're talking about the behavior
Yeah,
part of it?
animal behavior part, right?
I don't understand. I mean,
So we're interested in, you're in the meat business, okay? You're selling beef to folks to make various beef products that you're selling, and you've got range-fed, grass-fed cows on the one hand, and you've got industrially raised cows on the other hand. What other human activities or disciplines or studies would be involved with something like that? The economics, yeah. I mean, so if I'm raising cows, what's cheaper? Is it cheaper for me to just put them out to pasture, or is it how fast can I grow a cow and how much I have to invest in that? So I'm a business person. So definitely, so we've got biology, we got economics. What else do we have?
The culture matters because it depends on what they're feeding them.
The what?
The culture matters for the people because it depends on what they're feeding them and what's cheap where.
Yeah, so the culture of what's available in the culture. So what does that include? Psychology?
sociology.
Sociology? Sure. I mean, I'm used to kind of going to Lowe's and getting my piece of beef, and I don't think much about it, okay? So economics, sociology, psychology, anything else? How about politics? Any politics involved?
Yeah,
Why?
because one politic could support more of the industrial, fast-paced movement of beef and product.
Exactly. What's the business environment like for people who were industrially raising cows versus people who were range feeding their cows, and what kind of government supports am I going to be getting? If I'm a farmer, I don't know if you know, but American farmers are heavily subsidized. If corn prices go down, I'm still getting a good price for my corn. That's a subsidy. Okay, that's keeping farmers in business. If farmers weren't subsidized, you get a lot of people who wouldn't be into farming. So the whole industrial component of farming has to do with policies that are in place in the United States government. So now we're talking about government and politics, sociology, psychology. So we've actually covered a lot of different fields, and you'll see in your book there's a little diagram that shows kind of environmental science in the middle and all the different disciplines that are involved with it. So there's really nothing that we're going to talk about in this class that's just the science part. There's lots of other parts that go into that. So that's an important characteristic of this discipline. That's probably, I would say it's probably one of the defining characteristics of environmental science is that it's very interdisciplinary. Not so much for like physics, okay? If you're studying astronomy or if you're studying ballistics or something like that, yeah, I mean everybody's influencing everything, but some disciplines are much more focused in on certain areas than others. And environmental science is very multidisciplinary, so that's something to kind of keep in mind. Okay, so what's science? What is science? What? Let me ask. What's the goal of science? What does a scientist want to do that is unique to being a scientist, as opposed to a writer, for example, or a poet, or an artist, or
Experiment.
a politician? Yep, there's definitely experimentation involved with it.
They want to figure out new things.
Okay, new things. What do we want to do? Figure them out?
Yeah.
Figure them out. Let's call that discovery. If you could pick one word that a scientist is after, what would that be?
Objective.
Subjective. Objective. Yeah. These are all good characteristics. Science is objective as opposed to what? Subjective. Just sort of my opinion or the way I feel about it. Something that has some basis in physical. Really, what all scientists are after is kind of, we've turned this into sort of a slippery word, but the truth about the way the world operates. Let's say the physical universe. Truth is a funny word because if you're coming from the humanities fields, people say, well, the truth is what you experience, and there's my truth, and there's your truth. In science, we sort of put that aside, and it's almost kind of a belief. People who are scientists have faith that there is a world out there, a physical world that exists without me. You've heard that old philosophical question: if a tree falls in the forest and you're not there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, to a scientist would say, of course it makes a sound, because me being there has nothing to do with whether it makes a sound. So that's a certain faith in that. You ask a philosopher, and they might say, well, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe, how do you know? So so science and scientists are all into discovering truths. Okay, how easy is that? You know, when you think of truth, what do you think of?
Right and wrong.
Hmm?
Right and wrong.
Right and wrong, like how do you mean?
I guess you could say just, you know, black and white to a question. Like, is,
1 plus 1.
yeah, 1 plus 1, or is the sun hot, or,
Okay. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's basically the way the world
yeah.
is. What else?
Evidence.
Evidence. Okay, so evidence refers to facts. How much of the world do you think you really know about? Here we are in this room. You know, here we are. What percentage of the reality of this room, of the truth of this room, do you feel like you could comfortably say you know about? You could say, yeah, that's the truth about this room. Let's hypothetically say, and again I'm drawing circles, but let's say that circle represents everything about this room. How much of that circle would you say you know about? This is a really kind of
You know what we can
concrete.
see?
Hmm?
You know what we can see?
You know it can see, yeah. So I see this table. So how much of that table do you think I'm aware of because I can see it? Hmm?
Quite a bit. I mean, you're aware of the physical properties of it, the dimensions of it, most likely the weight, you can judge
Yep.
fairly quickly.
I could measure it, I could describe it, I could say that it's a dark color. I could measure its temperature. You have those little thermometers you can stick on that. What about this table don't I know?
What it's made of?
Hmm? Yeah, right away, I don't know what it's made of. My vision, how good's my vision? What is vision anyhow? What am I responding to?
The reflection of light.
Light. Okay, so light, anybody know what light is? Light, light is part of what we call the electromagnetic spectrum. Spectrum is basically a continuum of various things. So if we look at, let's look at what comes out of the sun, for example. The sun definitely emits light. Does it emit anything else?
Gamma rays.
Yeah, gamma rays and heat. Heat comes out of the sun that's not associated with the light. So actually this electromagnetic spectrum, what are the colors of the rainbow? That's what light is.
Red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet.
Okay, Roji Biv. So those colors of the rainbow make light. Okay. So actually, when you're talking about, and over here we have things like ultraviolet, and then X-rays, and other things. And then over here we have infrared, IR, and other things that way. So actually, you say, well, I can see something about that table, but if I look at all the radiation that's coming from that table, there's a lot that I can't see. You can sort of smell what's in this room, but if you brought your dog in, you think your dog could smell more or less?
More.
A heck of a lot more. Okay, so there's lots of things we can't smell. How about our hearing? How good's our hearing? Pretty good. But other animals have much better hearing. So there's things we can't hear, things we can't see, things we can't smell, and the level of that is actually huge. So we kind of think that we pretty much know a lot about this room. I'd say we know next to nothing about this room except the very minor things that our senses allow us. Plus we come in with preconceived notions like that the walls are going to be hard and all these different things. So I'd actually kind of say that maybe this much we know. would say the vast majority of what's around us, we don't know anything about it. Now, it's knowable, some parts of it are knowable, other parts we may never know about. This very table, there's things about this table. We don't really know what matter is. Isn't that kind of surprising? I mean, we've got the periodic table. You can talk about electrons and protons and neutrons, but when you start breaking those things down into smaller and smaller parts, they don't even know really ultimately what those things are made out of. So the most basic question of what is matter, if you really press a physicist, they can't tell you. That's pretty fundamental, and I'm saying I know this table. Well, I don't think I really know it at all. I think I know it based upon what I expect and what my senses are. And if we don't really know what matter is, well, then we don't really know what this room is either, until we really kind of get down to those things. So science is about discovering the parts that you can't see. And let's see, we only have about, I think we're probably running out of time. So I'm going to stop there, and then we'll kind of get more into the nitty-gritty of what the scientific method is about next time. Are there any questions? Humor me a few times, and when I ask for questions, just ask me something, just be nice. In the future. Nobody ever asks, I don't know, people don't ask questions. Dr. B, oh, that's so interesting. What do you mean by physical reality? Usually people don't say that. But just humor me every now and then, ask me a couple of questions. Makes me feel good.
So there's no oil in your coffee when you stick that butter in there?
Yeah, it's a lot of oil. I put coconut oil in there.
Oh, you stick there's no
Coconut oil, and the butter has oil.
And that doesn't affect the taste or makes
It
it
does, it
better?
makes it much better. Right, 2 tablespoons. Grass-fed butter. You can't get that anywhere. Maybe one of the alternative grocery stores here in town. Really good. You a coffee drinker?
I drink 1 cup a night, that's about it.
Not a night?
That's decaf.
Oh, decaf, okay. Well, all bets are off for decaf. No, I'm sure it works well with decaf too. All right. We'll see you Thursday. Start thinking about your capstone project. It's always good to pick something you like to do. You do.
Other than my reasons.
We take her to the doctor in like a couple minutes. Yeah, she's gonna check her, she gets shocked, so she's, what's today's Tuesday, she's 12 weeks.
First semester.
Wait, goes fast.
Yeah, I'm like, she'll be 3 months next week.
Wow.
I can't deal, like, I didn't cry or anything when my daughter was in kindergarten last year, but this one, I don't have to put it down.
Did she sleep?
All right.
Yeah.
So quizzes need a little extra time and tests?
Quizzes, well, tests, I can study for, have no problem. You know, I need a little extra time with it, it's a little hard to remember things.
Okay.
Quizzes, always have a problem with them. I know that's part of this course, I'll deal with that.
Yeah.
But,
What's the 26th?
yes. I just have to
Okay.
keep up on that.
All right. Well, we'll have our first one on a week from today. Did you get that part? You heard that part? Okay.
A week from today, no, I did not. What'd you say?
Yeah,
Next-
quizzes every week we'll start with a short quiz.
Right, yeah, I do, I remember that.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I think it was all I was gonna ask you, papers due a month from now, basically.
Yeah, it's right there. The date's right in the source.
29th November. No, September. 4 pages long. No more.
And you can put references. The references can be beyond the 4 pages. I don't care about it. You can give me 10 pages as long as 6 of them are references.
Yeah, I get you saying, it just not including title.
Yeah, just the text. The text I want to.
These 4
No more
pages.
than 4 pages.
And, the references, you said, when I asked about those sources, you said it was basically those 2 books we have. I don't have my book yet, I'll have it Thursday.
got at the bookstore?
It's like almost $200. I'm trying to get the money for that.
Look online, you might be able to get it cheaper, you might be able to get used one cheaper online.
Yeah, I'm gonna look for that. They're out of stock. Last couple places.
I'm checking in the library in the meantime to see if they have it, a reserve copy.
Oh,
So
yeah?
you can get in there and study from that.
Okay.
Because you definitely want to read that before Tuesday, you know, you gotta be reading that this week already.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I gotta be, okay. Next quiz is next Tuesday. Do we need anything read by Thursday?
Right. Be reading that first chapter.
First chapter.
Yeah, yeah, that's gonna definitely help you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.